Good morning. You listen to ForDaily.net, and I'm Kemp Harr. This morning, my guest is Russ Delozier, the president of the CRI, the Carpet and Rug Institute. Russ, how you doing?
I'm doing good, Kemp. Good morning to you.
We were together just recently in Washington, D.C. at the Sustainability Summit. And prior to that, we were together at the CARE conference, which was in Chattanooga. I want to talk a little bit about your background real quick. You've been doing this at CRI for 3 years, but prior to that, you were director of sustainability at first J&J, but that was acquired while you were there, and that became your job at Engineered Floors. And you did that for about 6 years combined. And then you were at Shaw for about 8 years, and you're a Georgia Tech grad, right?
Correct. I am blessed to have been in the industry for a number of years, worked largely in the sustainability environmental world, but it was also good to see you at the Flooring Sustainability Summit. It was the third version of that, and what I was most pleased to see there was all the flooring categories were represented, and I thought they did a really good job putting on that summit.
It's a good meeting for sure. So I want to talk about this New York State extended producer responsibility legislation that's coming at us down a freight train track. I want to tell a listener a little bit about that. Prior to that, though, you've got a little bit more good news. The CRI tracks the sales of carpet, and there was some good news in the second quarter. Carpet in Q2, from a dollar perspective, was up 3% on the commercial side and flat on the residential side. When you compare that to units, it's telling us that dollars are better than units, which means the market is consuming better in goods, right?
That is true. Second quarter was a bit of an uptick for us compared to previous quarters and compared to 2025. And exactly as you say, we do believe the consumer is looking at the products that our member mills make that are higher end. That's always good to see in any industry. They're preferring quality and performance and styling that they get from those type of goods. So we are very encouraged to see that. The second quarter was a positive quarter for our industry. We were glad to see it.
Let's move to this New York State extended producer responsibility legislation. And let me also remind the listener that AB 2398 in California was passed 16 years ago. That was their extended producer responsibility law. But the difference in that law is the consumer was actually paying a fee at the time of purchase to take care of the expenses of disposing of the product after its use. This New York legislation is different. Tell us a little bit about it, would you?
And yes, those two laws are different. And you are right, the California law does have some time on it, which gives us a little bit of insight and intelligence as we move on to New York. So really, all three groups in the supply chain play a role. The manufacturer, or what we here at CRI will call our member mills. The retailer plays a role in California, and the consumer does as well. And I like to really call it extended product responsibility. It's not just single-handedly a producer. And if you think about it, everybody along the supply chain plays a role. The retailer is helping make sure the consumer buys the right product for the right application, and that matters a significant amount for the sustainability of any product, the lifetime. And then the consumer plays an enormous role in the life of a product. It would be equivalent to asking a car dealer to sell a car and then the consumer never, ever change the oil. Well, the consumer knows in the case of a car is that they play a role in the life of their car. Well, they play a role in the life of their carpet and flooring as well. So that's what California is. It truly is getting everybody who's involved in the process engaged in the process. And that is the preferred method of true product responsibility. In the case of New York, and it's probably true because of what I would call just general trends in the environmental movement, is this idea of producer responsible organizations. It's this idea that, no, the only person along that supply chain that matters is the producer. They're the only ones that control, in essence, everything. Therefore, the burden of the cost of end of life rests with them. And that's what we have in New York. So yes, it is quite a bit different, and it will offer a significant amount of challenges to our industry. What also makes New York exceptionally challenging is it doesn't include just carpet. It includes other kind of somewhat unrelated flooring categories, namely cushion, but then turf, which I think we'd all agree is not carpet, And so that's where it does. Plus, there's no mention at all of any other flooring categories either. So New York definitely offers the industry challenges.
That is so interesting that they didn't even think about some of the other flooring categories, which also have an end-of-life disposal.
Yeah, there's no doubt that there's challenges there. Here at the CRI, we are working through and trying to understand those. The California process that you described, we have about 15 years under our belt. There's no doubt carpet has seen a more significant decline in California than it's seen anywhere else in North America. And that's been real challenging to us, and we have not met with particularly friendly responses on that data point. We really don't want any legislation to harm any one product category, and that has seemed to be the effect there in California.
So on this New York law, what's the timing on it?
Officially, the law was passed at the end of December in 2022. The initial original dates had it required to have a plan submitted to the Department of Environmental Conservation, or DEC, there in New York by the end of last year. Because there were some concerns with the law and delays in providing, the recycling organization and the industry's antitrust provisions, DEC provided the industry a letter of discretionary extension. Officially, the law is now requiring that we have a plan submitted by the end of this year and start working by the middle or July of next year. So we're really up against it. We're working feverishly. I got to tell you, Kemp, a significant portion of my time here at the Carpet and Rug Institute is spent focused right now on helping get the New York Surface Recovery Alliance up and running there in New York.
So the biggest difference between these two, the California and New York legislation, is the consumer doesn't have to pay anything, and it saddled the expenses of the final disposition of used carpet with the producer. The costs are going to have to be offset some way, so it's going to require probably mills who sell into New York to raise prices. What do you think?
That would certainly be the logical. If we said any other data point, if we said fuel prices went up, if we said labor costs went up, if we said transportation went up, if anything else went up, the logical conclusion would be the product cost would go up. So it's certainly a reasonable assumption, what you've just said, that would happen. Now, what's important is that has to be handled individually. Each producer that chooses to sell into New York are going to have to make that decision on their own. And so the free market will determine how to handle that, and that's something we do not talk about here either at the CRI or within NYSRA. That's entirely an individual decision how they handle it.
So interesting. One interesting geographical thing that needs to be brought up is California is on the end of the country. The borders are the water. In New York, if you raise the price of the cost of carpet, it's going to be so easy for the consumer to run into the neighboring states to buy the flooring, right?
You do really bring up a good point, Kemp. There is not an easy answer to that. Yes, interstate commerce will continue, and this will possibly have some impact, but we cannot speculate what it is yet. But we are going to have to pay attention to that going forward, without a doubt.
Well, I wanted to let the listener know what was going on in New York as this thing continues to build some steam. Again, been talking to Russ Delozier, the president of the CRI, about the New York State pending EPR legislation. And you've been listening to Kemp Harr and FloorDaily.net.